Welcome to the Entrepreneur Gene. I'm your host, Laurie Barkman. Each week, we'll hear from founders and CEOs to explore key decisions they've made for growth, value creation, and challenges along the way. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, offering entrepreneur advisory services from transition to transaction. Don't forget to hit subscribe, follow us for the latest episodes, and visit thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com for more exclusive content. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Gene. I'm Laurie Barkman, your host. I am so excited to have today's guest with me. He is a friend, he's a colleague, and he's a leader in strategy, business, and entrepreneurship with so much creativity and energy. I know you're going to love him. He's the host of his company's podcast, which is called Business Banter. And he's the owner of two companies, JARVISXR, and he's the president at Taylor Marketing. My guest today is Taylor Abbett. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Hi, Laurie. Thanks for having me. Love that introduction.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. We are friends in Vistage, and we can talk a little bit about that as well as we go through today's episode. The very first question that I have for you, Taylor, is there an entrepreneur gene, and what is it to you?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I'm sure every entrepreneur gets asked that, and it might be different for each one. But I would say, yeah, there's certainly some, hard wiring that goes into being an entrepreneur because it's not easy. It can be very rewarding, and obviously, it's what the United States runs on, right? Is small business and entrepreneurism. But from my perspective, it was funny. Everyone asked me, did I have this big plan for my company? And I really didn't. But you get to the point where you don't want to work for anybody. So it's either working for yourself. If you're going to work that hard, you might as well work for yourself. Yeah, I think all small businesses have a bit of a gene that, they're willing to go out there and put it out on the line. And some days are better than others, as we all know.
Absolutely. You kind of hinted at one thing, which is being your own boss. Was that something that was important to you as you were thinking about whether to stay on the corporate path or to do your own thing?
Yeah, well, it was a very, back when I decided to form my Taylor Marketing company, which, believe it or not, we're coming on our 25th year in business, which just seems like yesterday. The job that I was interviewing before I started my company, I went and I interviewed with sort of the big ad agencies because I've been working for an ad agency. And sort of what I did was sort of as the rainmaker of an agency, which if you're not one of the owners, that's a really weird position in an agency. There's not a lot of people like that because it's a very long sales cycle. You have to sort of be able to survive while you're waiting for business to come in. So after interviewing with them and sort of seeing that I would have been, let's say, easily gotten rid of if I hadn't done what they wanted me to do, I sort of back-ended in my company. It was before I had my wife and daughters, and it was just me. So, the first 3 years are eating Cheerios and wondering if you're actually going to make enough money to make it work. And, got a few breaks and got a couple companies where I was like, I have enough customers that, I think I can make a go of this. So.
Did you have any family members influencing you as an entrepreneur?
I didn't have so many sort of, other business owners. My uncle was a very famous doctor. My cousin, who I'm still very close with, became a big executive at Microsoft. So there was some, technology influence there and, good work ethic. I went to prep school. So the puritanical work ethic was pounded into me from an early age at Shadyside and continued at Trinity Pauling. So I think you need that as well, right? Good work ethic and able to muscle through the hard times. And I think that was a big, help for me when you're trying to figure things out.
And what about the genetic cheat code as an entrepreneur? Are there any traits that you think are really important from a personality or characteristic standpoint to help entrepreneurs be successful?
The biggest one that comes to mind for me would be tenacity. I mean, you have to be tenacious. There's a good friend of mine, I won't say it. Maybe I'll get him on your show as well. He's become very successful. And I always thought he was like the Teflon man because people would say, his first business that is still going on, he made a lot of money. They would be like, that's not going to work and you're going to fail. And that's already been done. And he would, and he was a copy salesman before he started his first company. And I was always amazed at that you couldn't break his veneer. Like, is any of that going to get through to him? And he was like, no. So I think, you have to be tenacious. You have to believe in yourself. As I said earlier, it's not easy. So there's going to be times where people are going to doubt you. If you're successful, then they might be envious of your success. If you're not successful, then they're going to be told you so. So you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I think if you're tenacious and you believe in yourself, that'll get you a long way.
Yeah, tenacity is an excellent, excellent trait. There's so many examples too. I love the example of what you brought up where people have to be the Teflon. A famous one that you might be familiar with is FedEx, right? FedEx, Fred Smith and I think it was an undergraduate class, or it might have been master's. Either way, he was in the university setting, did the business plan for what became eventually FedEx, and I think he failed. I think they gave him a D or something.
Yeah, he got a C.
He didn't get enough for FedEx, but he got
Yeah.
something. That wasn't a good grade. And he was, and that tenacity obviously kept him rolling on.
Well, so many examples out of garage, Microsoft, Steve Jobs. You look at these guys, didn't come from great schools, or a lot of times not a lot of money, and created things that were, still going very well today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that 10-year overnight success that we hear about so much. Being your own boss, having that tenacity, so important. Taylor, next question for you is a challenge. What's a challenge that you're facing today as an entrepreneur?
I would say, it's a little bit, if we're talking actually today, the economy is a little rocky right now. So from a marketing advertising perspective, that tends to be the first thing that people are going to cut. It's looked at as a cost. So when you're looking to cut things, it's obviously the first thing that can get cut. So the economy is a little, and again, we're in election year. So, markets, businesses in general do not like uncertainty, and election years bring uncertainty for not just Wall Street, but I think for businesses in general. I think if we're just talking about my space in general, a lot of companies now are moving towards project-based work, which is fine, versus sort of retainer work. I always say the problem with that is you have a beginning, you have an end. You can imagine if you got a lot of employees and every month you got to come up with that number. Well, if you're completely relying on project, that can get really stressful because there's never going to be enough that's coming in and going out the other door. But that seems to be, the way we're going. So, you can fight it, or you can just, you can just go with it.
And there's probably a lot of entrepreneurs listening who can relate to that recurring revenue versus project revenue, one-time revenue. Lots of companies are probably addressing that challenge or facing that challenge in some way. What advice can you offer to other entrepreneurs who are facing this challenge?
I would say, there's a couple different models that I've seen out there. A lot of it is in bringing value and making yourself sort of indispensable to your customers. So in terms of getting paid for that, a lot of people are trying to take maybe a smaller fee, whatever you want to call it, but have it over a longer period of time so that they can sort of manage it out. That's one way of doing it. But a lot of it, you just, I have interns every semester, and I always tell them for their first jobs, like, make yourself indispensable. Make yourself so that, if you're gone, your boss is going to be like, where did Laurie go? Like, we couldn't do it without Laurie. Like, and I think the same is for entrepreneurism. If you can make yourself sort of indisposable for your customers, it makes it a little harder. So if you can think of things that will make you sticky, think of things that will make you sticky, because if you're not sticky, it's very easy. You just become sort of a line item.
Yeah. How do you solve the problem, right? How do you solve that ultimate problem that your client needs to solve? And you are the differentiated resource that can enable them to do that, less time, money, or people. And so that it makes you sticky. So that's a great piece of advice. Mm-hmm. Taylor, the next thing I want to talk about is the future. What excites you about the future of your industry?
Yeah, and that's sort of a great question. That sort of leads to my sister little company here called Jarvis Technologies. And I think, the future, there's so much, just in this past year, if we talk, look at AI and we weren't even talking about it 12 months ago. And now it's just on everything. So I think marketing is going to change, just as I'm old enough back in the 90s when the first websites came out. I remember telling my boss, I said, hey, Renee, we got to start building websites. And she was like, websites? What are websites? I'm like, everybody's going to have these things, And I think a lot of these tools now, whether it's augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, it's going to make my industry much more efficient in some ways. I have some college kids, I work with who are coming out with social media degree. I'm like, you know, you might want to find other things because, with a lot of these tools, that mid-level manager or upper manager is going to be able to create a lot more content faster. And all the people who used to do that, I don't know if they're going to have jobs because, I was in English. I do a lot of writing, and a lot of these tools are good, and things that maybe took me 3-4 hours to write, I can get a good draft using chat and edit it, make it into my client's voice, and it takes me 30 minutes. It takes me 40 minutes. So these tools are going to change the way marketing's done. I think, I'm doing a talk on this, but the future of marketing, it's not unheard of that you might have your own marketing bot, Laurie, and you go, oh, create me a marketing plan. And then you say, create me the creative pieces for the marketing plan. And then you say, okay, bot, go out and buy my media for me. And then it does it all for you, right? And then at the end of the month, it comes back and says, hey, Laurie, here's our results. I was monitoring our Google ads. I tweaked it on the fly and your email got such and such. And I think we should tweak them, this because we got a better response. But I mean, we're not that far from it. So, 5-10 years, that could very well be. And then I'll be out of a job.
I don't know. I think maybe, right? But I think there's something really important about AI, no matter what role you're in, whether it's marketing or other roles that are using AI today as an enhancement, not a replacement.
Yes.
I'm affiliated with Carnegie Mellon. Carnegie Mellon's doing a ton of work in the AI space. And that's a big message is that, there's a lot of hallucinations. There's things that aren't quite right. We do need as humans to have a lens of what makes sense, right? A good example is design. Does that mean that we're no longer going to train our young people or people who want to learn design? They're not going to learn what good design is. I remember there when I worked at a apparel retailer, there was a poster above our color printer which says good design goes to heaven, bad design goes everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so just in that one example of having a perspective on what makes sense and what doesn't. And it's possible that in the world of AI, it's going to get to the point where we don't need certain roles. And I can see that, but I think the power of it, and at least recognizing the short term for marketing industries and others alike, that we've got to start using these tools to at least experiment and see what really can add value, saving time for you as a service provider, adding efficiencies, adding quality for the client. I mean, it's a win. It should be a win-win.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And I would also, just playing along with your thing, I got a liberal arts degree and CMU, obviously one of the best. I do think like the future also, and again, this is something I try and get my interns to do is, whether it's a job or whatever, but asking questions. So, we went from liberal arts education being like, oh, you're learning. And now, I was always like, you weren't focused on whatever, but, the ability to be rounded and ask probing questions because AI is only as good as the questions you make it. And I have a literal conversation with it, but I do really, sometimes I'm taking for granted, but it's asking it the right or follow-up questions, or you didn't answer that enough, or rephrase that, or whatever, so it'll be interesting to see like at CMU or liberal arts colleges, whether there becomes sort of a degree in, creative questions or, I don't know what that would be called, but I could see that, right? You're right. It's a tool. It's a tool. Hopefully it doesn't take over.
Yeah. Hashtag it's all about the prompt.
It's all about the prompt.
It's all about the prompt.
Exactly.
All right, Taylor, we've spent the first half of our show learning from you, and now we're going to change gears a little bit. I want to learn more about you. Tell me your origin story. What's little Taylor, doing, and how did little Taylor find his way to life as an entrepreneur?
Oh boy, we don't have enough time to do that. I'll have to go in quick mode here. So I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Shadyside. It was just my mom and I. And so we were sort of right near Walnut Street for those who know Pittsburgh. So sort of the trendy place of Pittsburgh. And I went to Shadyside Academy through the middle school. So back in those days, it was all male. and very demerit based and very structured. I really wanted to go to the senior school, which was the high school. But my grandmother and mother thought that, no, that was not a good spot for me to go because I enjoyed sports and goofing around and whatever. So I got shipped off to a prep school called Trinity Pauling. That was in Pauling, New York. And if you don't know about it, it's sort of like if you ever saw the movie Dead Poets Society, it's very similar to Dead Poets Society. So I went through that for 4 years, and then I graduated, and then I ended up going to Denison University in Ohio. Again, sort of liberal arts, did not quite know what I wanted to do. But my junior year, I went abroad and I studied at the Imperial College in London. And that was sort of my first taste of advertising. I sort of was taking classes. I was working for a magazine. And it was sort of the first time in my life that I was like, school was always sort of like, you get the grade and you move on, but it was sort of fun. So I got the advertising bug. And then came back to Pittsburgh, couldn't get a job for the life of me in Pittsburgh. Got my first job in Rochester, New York, worse weather than Pittsburgh. And I worked up there in sort of the sports marketing sort of arena. Then I went for a startup. So, hey, there you go. So the entrepreneur, my boss was an entrepreneur back then. So I went to go work for him and did that for like three years or so. As typical sort of in the dot-com age, it didn't look like it was going to make it. But it was a fun ride, learned a lot, sort of fun to see. Came back to Pittsburgh, and believe it or not, I was going to go down to Atlanta where we had our home base from the other company. And because of family, my mom was getting older, I decided that I was going to stay in Pittsburgh. So I did everything. I sold radio, I sold video, and then I ended up with my first agency, which was Montage. So I then worked for them for 5 years, and right about then she sold the company. And I decided not to go with the sale. And that's when I started my own company. That's sort of a quick synopsis of my life to date. And right now I have a lovely wife. We live in Aspinwall, and I have 3 daughters. My oldest going off to college, which is
sad.
Oh yeah, I'm not
sad but happy.
Not taking it very well, but I'll be okay. And
Yeah.
then
It's a happy, sad time to be an empty nester, I think.
Well, we're not empty nesters. I still have 2 more.
Oh, 2 more. Yeah. So you're not empty at all.
No, I still got 2 more coming back. She's the first. Maybe the next 2 won't be won't break my heart as much.
Aw. Taylor, so if you could go back in time to give yourself some entrepreneurial advice, what would it be?
So my entrepreneurial advice, if I went all the way back to college, it depends how far you go back. I really suggest, college kids do internships, find out what you like, learn, because so many people waste time. They spend all this time going down a path and then find out that, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be. So I think, internships are very important. Very important also, if you can, find a mentor, find somebody through your college or just, someone you can go have coffee with who's maybe done it. And just, I wish if I could have gone back and said like, even today, when you're sort of doing your own thing, there's always pieces of a business that you're not good at. You're good at some parts and you're not good at others. And I've always been sort of envious of sometimes when people have partnerships, right? And the one is very good at this, and then the partner does the other piece of the pie. So if you're going to do your own thing, I think it's also important to realize like, what are you good at and what aren't you good at? Other people I've talked to have started companies. I'm like, make sure you have sales before you go off on your own. If you're working, if you're married and you're working for a big company and you got the 401k and the healthcare and the blah, 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 and you're not a sales type, maybe you're an engineer and you create a really good product, make sure you got some business because, it's when you go out there, you're probably going to starve for a while.
Yeah. Those are great pieces of advice. And I think especially for people who are thinking about taking that side hustle to a full-time thing, that can be a very daunting decision. Yeah. So I have a lot of respect for people who take that risk eventually.
Or to your point, you'd sometimes, start it on the side, dip your toe in, keep your day job and see if it can grow into something. Because what the big thing is like a big difference between a hobby and something that you're going to make your livelihood off of. So there's a big jump. And as you know, I try to tell people when you start your business, whether it's big or small, it's expensive. I mean, by the time you pay taxes and overhead and people and, Nobody's paying for your retirement. And if you have any kind, like I was just telling in our industry, very, revenue swings, you gotta be set for the long haul and start putting away some cash.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You do a lot of things outside of work. You mentioned your family. What do you do for fun?
For my life, I've been a big rackets guy. So I was big tennis player, big squash, platform tennis, becoming a little bit more of an outdoor guy. Like, I don't know if this is, my wife says this Taylor 2.0. So I didn't really get to do it too much this summer because the kids were doing a lot, but I'm thinking of maybe, more hiking and things of that nature, but always been sort of a rackets guy. I love to travel, reading. I'm an avid reader. I love history, read a lot of history, and that's pretty much it. And then, enjoy watching my kids. My kids are all into sports. So my oldest one's going to be running. Although unfortunately in college, she has one home match and all the others are way far away. So I'm like, to drive all that way and watch her run 12 minutes is, I don't know how many of those we're going to make. So, she runs pretty fast. So.
If we were going to fast forward in life and you weren't in the same time life balance that you're in now, you had a little more time on your side to spend doing things. Are there things that you just talked about, whether it's time with family, sports and enjoying sports, whether it's watching and attending games or participating? What do you anticipate enjoying when your business is no longer occupying so much of your time?
I joked with my wife that we've gone to some bread and breakfast, and sort of like I said, would it be fun to be like, the married couple that's the podcasters, and we like rate bed and breakfast, and do it for like the older types, and be like, I'd be here's the activities you can do around the bed and breakfast, and my wife would be like, oh, the food's this, and then so I think that would actually be sort of fun.
That's a super fun idea.
I figured, hey, a lot of people are making money over other silly things.
Well, that's right. You could be huge on YouTube. Why not?
Why not do that? So I've thought of that. I've thought of like writing. I've always sort of been I was a creative writer back at Denison. So everybody wants to write a book, but I don't know if I would just do it for myself, just as a release. But I think, travel, writing, I think I do envision always working. I could see like going to, work for a family owned company as maybe their CMO, or even part-time as a CMO, sort of to keep active. And, I like ideas. I like, as Laurie, I love like the strategic partnerships and the big ideas, and that sort of, so if some company needed somebody like that, that would sort of be fun to keep doing.
Yeah, and I've been enjoying getting to know you better in our Vistage group. We're part of a trusted advisor group, and you did a presentation this month, which really helped me get to know you and your business and all the amazing things that you're doing for your clients and what you like to do outside. So I'm so appreciative, Taylor, that you have come on the show with me and shared all that. We're sharing it now with the world. If people want to find you, what's a good place to connect?
Yeah, my email address is taylor@tailoredmarketing.com. And that is not spelled like my name. If I had a dime for every time somebody asked me that, it's TAILORED, tailoredmarketing.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn. If you just look up Taylor Abbett, relatively active on LinkedIn as well.
And we'll have those links in the show notes, so definitely people can find you. Taylor, thank you so much for coming on the Entrepreneur Gene.
So much. Well, I'm going to get you on my podcast now too. So.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you.
Back at you.
And to my audience, thank you so much. And if you learned something on today's show or you laughed, tell someone about this podcast. It's the best thing you can do for us. We appreciate you. Thank you so much again, Taylor. And this has been another exciting episode of the Entrepreneur Gene. We'll see you next time. Hey, that's a wrap. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, working with entrepreneurs who want to escape feeling like a prisoner in their own business and to eventually let go flawlessly. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And if you want to help support the Entrepreneur Gene, I'd encourage you to leave a rating and review. Ratings and reviews truly help our show grow and get in front of more entrepreneurs just like you. If you do leave a rating and review, we'll be so happy. Take a screenshot of it, send it to my email, Laurie@btsherpa.com, and we'll send you a free digital copy of my book, The Business Transition Handbook. And we'll also enter you to win one of our monthly swag boxes. For show notes, including links to everything in today's episode, be sure to visit btsherpa.com. Also, as a reminder, you can watch this full video interview on our YouTube channel for the Business Transition Sherpa. While you're there, be sure to check out videos from our award-winning podcast called Succession Stories. We'll see you next time on The Entrepreneur Gene.